was at its turning point. Europe burned, cities fell, and hope thinned like smoke over the Channel. The Allies had one chance to strike back an invasion that could end Nazi domination, but success required more than force. It needed deception. If Hitler discovered where the invasion would land, it would be over before it began. So, in secret rooms beneath London's haze, minds sharper than blades began crafting an illusional lie so vast, so convincing, it would rewrite the art of war. They called it Operation Bodyguard. It would make the devil himself believe in ghosts. It began not with soldiers, but with silence. Inside the walls of the London controlling section, a handful of strategists, spy masters, and storytellers gathered. Their mission: confuse the enemy, mislead the Führer, and make him fight shadows. Deception wasn't new in war, but this was theater on a global scale. Britain would not only trick the Germans, they would make them believe the impossible. It was intelligence warfare at its purest. Words, fake radio chatter, phantoms on the map. Every lie, carefully placed. Every truth buried deep. One mistake, and the entire invasion could die before it ever reached France. The seed of deception took root in late 1943. Hitler still ruled most of Europe, and the Allies faced a fortress stretching from Norway to the south of France, the Atlantic Wall. The question haunted Allied command: where would we break through? Normandy offered a chance, but it was lightly defended, overlooked. To make it work, they had to make Hitler look elsewhere. The answer? Make him believe the attack would come at Pas-de-Calais, shortest route from Britain to France. But belief doesn't come easily. It had to be earned. It's with fear, with proof, and with precision. Enter a cast of ghosts and gamblers. Double agents, fake armies, phantom fleets, each one assigned a role in the grand illusion. At the center was a man with nerves of steel, Juan Pujol Garcia, known to the British as Garbo. He was the master of deceit, a Spanish double agent who had tricked the Abwehr for years. Through him, Britain fed Hitler exactly what he wanted to hear. Carefully scripted lies disguised as truth. Every message Garbo sent was a seed of doubt planted in the Führer's mind. And soon that doubt would grow into blind conviction. But deception was never easy. It demanded control of information, of timing, of human trust. The Allies had to orchestrate dozens of false operations under the Bodyguard umbrella. Fortitude North, Fortitude South, Zeppelin, Glimmer, Taxable. Each with its own web of lies. Each designed to reinforce the same story: the invasion isn't coming to Normandy. The Germans would read fake reports, hear fake radio signals, see fake ships on the horizon. Every illusion crafted to perfection. Yet behind the illusion, real men risked their lives. One slip, one leak, and the dream of liberation could dissolve into blood and sand. From Scotland to Dover, the illusion came alive. Fake landing craft lined the coasts. Inflatable tanks sat in meadows. Even Hollywood artists joined the effort, camouflaging reality with canvas and paint. The Ghost Army was born. At its head stood General George S. Patton, a man Hitler respected and feared. His presence alone made the deception believable. To the Germans, Patton was the hammer of the Allies. And if Patton was in Kent, then surely the blow would fall at Calais. The stage was set. The actors in position, in the audience, the German high command was ready to be fooled. Behind enemy lines, the Abwehr listened. Reports from Garbo, messages from spies, signals intercepted all pointed to Calais. The deception was working, yet within the fog of war, one question lingered. Would Hitler believe it completely? The Führer, as paranoia, was both weapon and weakness. He trusted few, doubted many, but he worshipped his own instincts. Those instincts told him the real invasion was still to come. Even when troops stormed the beaches of Normandy, Hitler refused to release his reserves from Calais. The lie had taken root so deeply. Truth itself became the illusion. But before D-Day came, the planning, the months of delicate preparation that made Bodyguard possible. Every coded message was rehearsed, every double agent tested. Churchill himself approved the deception strategy, calling it a war of the mind. For the first time, propaganda became a battlefield. It's not in newspapers, but in enemy intelligence networks. The British didn't just hide their secrets, they fed false ones. With each whisper, they pulled the German gaze farther from Normandy. It wasn't just about lies, It was about control. The Allies were about to prove that information could be deadlier than bullets. Still, deception had a human cost. Many agents played their parts knowing discovery meant death. They lived double lives, loved under false names, and watched their own shadows. Some never made it home. Garbo's reports traveled through channels filled with risk radio operators, couriers, and handlers who could vanish overnight. Yet they continued. Because each transmission meant hope. Each lie told in London saved lives in Normandy. The irony was haunting truth sacrificed for the greater good. And in that moral twilight, the war's most invisible heroes wrote their lines in silence. By early 1944, Operation Bodyguard had become a symphony of deceit. Maps, letters, fake troop movements, all moving in harmony. It wasn't chaos, it was art. The Allies created patterns the Germans couldn't ignore. Bombings were staged in false locations to strengthen the illusion of Calais as the target, even weather reports were manipulated. Somewhere in the mix of lies and truth, Hitler became prisoner to his own certainty. The world's most feared man fooled by imagination. That the operation was fragile. If one agent broke, if one rumor turned true, the entire facade could crumble overnight. As the invasion drew near, tension thickened. In the early summer of 1944, Britain's skies buzzed with aircraft, radio chatter, and coded transmissions. The deception had reached its peak. Hitler's intelligence analysts concluded Normandy was merely a feint. Calais remained the true goal. German panzer divisions stood ready there, waiting for an attack that would never come. Meanwhile, across the Channel, real soldiers prepared for D-Day. The storm was coming. Only a handful of men knew the truth, that the greatest invasion in history would rely on the most dangerous lie ever told. June 5th, 1944. Rain pounded the coast. The invasion was delayed, yet even the weather played into Bodyguard's hands. German commanders believed no sane general would attempt an assault in such storms. The deception seemed confirmed proof in their minds that Normandy was not the target. Hitler slept soundly, convinced he had guessed right. But across the Channel, thousands of ships waited. Men whispered prayers. Engines hummed beneath the waves. And at dawn, the lie would become legend. Operation Bodyguard had done its job. The enemy looked the wrong way, and the real storm was about to begin. When the first landings began at Normandy, confusion gripped the German command. Reports were conflicting. Was this the main invasion, or a diversion? Garbo's messages continued, reinforcing the Calais story. This is not the real invasion, he reported. The main force is yet to come. Hitler believed him. Reinforcements were held back. For days, Allied troops clawed their way inland while German reserves waited, for ghosts. Bodyguard wasn't just a deception anymore, it was a shield. Every hour of confusion meant thousands more men survived. Every lie told. Bought time for the truth to triumph. For 14 crucial days, Hitler refused to move his divisions. Even as Normandy burned, he held faith in the illusion. His generals begged him to act, but he saw what Bodyguard wanted him to see. Calais remained in his mind. The true invasion's site. It was the greatest victory of misinformation ever achieved. Operation Bodyguard had not only protected D-Day, it had reshaped the entire war. Through illusion and intellect, the Allies had turned deception into salvation. But beneath that triumph lay a chilling truth. To win, they had to become masters of manipulation. As the beaches were secured and France began to rise again, the world learned the power of illusion. Operation Bodyguard remained hidden for years, buried beneath secrecy and silence. But those who knew understood. The war had not been won by strength alone, but by imagination. The greatest weapons were not tanks or planes but lies, woven with courage. And as the dust settled over Europe, one question lingered like smoke. In war, where truth dies to save lives, who truly wins? The aftermath of D-Day was chaos, yet calculated chaos. Allied command moved swiftly, spanning the deception even after the beaches were taken. They needed Hitler to believe Calais was still the target, so the illusion continued. Fake radio messages still hummed across the Channel. Phantom divisions still moved through Kent and Garbo. He kept writing. The main invasion, he reported, has not yet begun. Hitler clung to his belief like a drowning man to driftwood. The lie had become his comfort in his cage. Even as the Allies advanced, he refused to see what was right before him. But deception wasn't only about the enemy, it demanded secrecy from within. Many Allied soldiers had no idea they were part of a lie. Orders were compartmentalized, units separated. The fewer who knew, the safer the truth. In war, ignorance became protection. Even among generals, only a handful knew the full scale of Bodyguard. It was a labyrinth of trust so deep that even those inside it could get lost. Every step had to be rehearsed, every voice in harmony, because one discordant note, one careless whisper, could bring the entire illusion crashing down. In London, the masterminds watched the deception unfold like a grand performance. Colonel John Bevan, head of the London Controlling Section, orchestrated the operation with cold precision. He wasn't on the battlefield, yet his pen killed armies. Bevan's team monitored intercepted German communications, daily measuring the success of their lies through the enemy's reactions. Each intercepted cable confirmed what they hoped. The Germans were moving reinforcements away from Normandy. Every false report, every planted photograph, every forged signal, it was working. The war was being rewritten, not with blood but with brilliance. Meanwhile, in occupied France, the resistance fought in the shadows. Their sabotage missions aligned perfectly with Bodyguard's illusions, cutting railways, spreading rumors, feeding German paranoia. Civilians risked everything to amplify the deception. A farmer could be a messenger, a schoolteacher, a spy. A simple radio transmission could shift divisions. They were part of the invisible army, the heartbeat beneath Bodyguard's mask. While soldiers stormed the beaches, these men and women waged war with whispers. They fought without glory, without medals. But their courage kept the lie alive. And in that silence, freedom slowly took shape. By July 1944, Hitler's grip on reality had fractured. Reports of Allied advances in Normandy clashed with his belief that the real invasion was still coming. His generals urged action, release the panzer divisions, strike now, but he refused. The deception had done more than mislead him. It had confirmed his arrogance. He believed he alone saw the bigger picture, that everyone else was fooled, and so he became the perfect victim, deceived by his own conviction. Operation Bodyguard didn't just fool Hitler, it used him, his pride. It was the final instrument in the Allies' symphony of lies. As Allied troops pushed deeper into France, the effects of Bodyguard rippled through every battlefield. German reinforcements arrived too late, too scattered, too confused. Tanks moved in circles. Divisions clashed with orders that no longer made sense. The German war machine, once unstoppable, was now choking on misinformation, and all because of a story. A story told by liars in service of truth. It was proof that war wasn't just about strength or courage, it was about imagination. And in that war of minds, the Allies had built a masterpiece. A deception so vast, it became indistinguishable from destiny. But even masterpieces have cracks. Some German commanders began to question the deception. Field Marshal Rommel, the Desert Fox, was among them. He suspected Normandy was real, but his warnings went unheard. Hitler's inner circle dismissed him. The Führer's faith in Garbo's intelligence was absolute. Ironically, the more Garbo lied, the more he was trusted. And so, the truth remained buried under layers of deceit. By the time reality surfaced, it was too late. The Allies had already broken through. France was rising, and the man who had built his empire on lies was undone by a greater one. Behind the scenes, British intelligence watched with unease. The success of Bodyguard was staggering but dangerous. If the Germans uncovered Garbo's role, every Allied spy could be compromised. So even victory required silence. Garbo himself became a ghost, his true identity known only to a few. He continued feeding false reports until the very end of the war, maintaining the illusion long after D-Day. For his work, the Germans awarded him the Iron Cross. The British gave him the MBE. 2 medals from 2 enemies. Proof that in war, truth and deceit sometimes wear the same face. As Paris was liberated in August 1944, the world began to glimpse the magnitude of the deception. Bodyguard's success was not just in D-Day, reshaped intelligence warfare forever. It proved that minds could outmaneuver machines, and that fiction, when crafted with precision, could rewrite history. But for those who lived it, the victory felt heavier. They had lied, manipulated, even sacrificed their own agents. The moral weight of deception was real. How far could one go in the name of freedom? For many, that question haunted them long after the guns fell silent. And yet, Bodyguard's legacy grew. Military academies would later study it as the pinnacle of strategic deception. Its methods inspired Cold War espionage, propaganda, and psychological warfare. From fake bases to disinformation campaigns, the echoes of Bodyguard spread across generations. But none would match its brilliance or its audacity. It wasn't just about fooling Hitler. It was about proving that truth itself could be weaponized, but the human mind, when guided by purpose, could outthink tyranny. Operation Bodyguard was more than a plan, it was a warning. And in every war, the first casualty is always the truth. In the war rooms beneath Whitehall, maps were cleared, reports filed away, secrets sealed. The men who built the illusion quietly returned to obscurity. No parades, no medals, just silence. They had saved the world, and no one would ever know their names. For decades, Operation Bodyguard remained classified, details buried deep within British archives. It wasn't until the 1970s that the full story began to emerge. And when it did, historians could scarcely believe it. A war won not by bullets, but by the theater of the mind. A play performed on the stage of Europe itself. Even after the truth surfaced, many of Bodyguard's operatives never spoke of their roles. Some couldn't. Others wouldn't. They had spent years living inside lies so deeply that reality became difficult to separate. Their families knew only fragments. Their graves bore no hint of the shadows they walked. It was the burden of secret heroes, those who saved lives, unseen. And yet their silence carried a strange poetry. For in a world built on deception, perhaps the truest form of loyalty was anonymity. They had become what they once created, phantoms, fading into the mist of history. The success of Operation Bodyguard also reshaped Hitler's downfall. His paranoia deepened. He distrusted his generals, his advisors, even his own intelligence networks. Each deception fed the madness already within him. As the Allies advanced on Germany, Hitler retreated into delusion, issuing impossible orders, denying defeats, clinging to fantasies of secret weapons. The man who once deceived nations could no longer tell truth from fiction. Operation Bodyguard hadn't just fooled Hitler, it had unmade him. His empire began to collapse from within, consumed by lies of his own making. The perfect symmetry of deception turned inward. But history, like deception, thrives on interpretation. Some critics later argued that Hitler's defeat was inevitable, that Bodyguard merely hastened the end. Others saw it differently. Without the deception, they said, DID could have been a massacre. The beaches could have run red for weeks. The Allies might never have secured a foothold in France. Truth or speculation, it didn't matter. What mattered was what Operation Bodyguard represented. The triumph of intellect over brutality, strategy over chaos. It was a war won not by might, but by the imagination of men who dared to dream in darkness. And yet, even the most perfect deception leaves behind questions. Could such manipulation ever be justified again? Would nations, once freed by lies, use those same tactics in future wars? Operation Bodyguard opened a door that could never be closed. It changed how governments thought, how wars were fought, how truth itself was perceived. In the shadows of victory, new dangers were born, because once you learn to control belief, you learn to control everything. Deception became an art form, painted across maps and whispered through static. In London, the 20 Committee named after the Roman numerals XX for double-cross wove a web of lies so intricate that even their allies struggled to follow. Every captured German spy in Britain was turned, flipped into double agents who fed false stories to Berlin. Letters were forged, fake cables sent, and every rumor carefully planted like seeds in Hitler's mind. The Allies weren't just fighting on beaches or in the skies, they were fighting in his imagination. That was where the real battle began. Meet Juan Pujol Garcia, codename Garbo, a man who never fired a gun, yet shaped the course of war. A failed businessman from Spain, Garbo convinced the Germans he commanded a vast spy network inside Britain. In truth, it was all fiction. He wrote reports from a London apartment using details pulled from newspapers, weather forecasts, and pure invention. Berlin rewarded him with medals. London rewarded him with trust. Together, they turned his fantasy into Operation Fortitude, the backbone of Bodyguard. A plan so believable, even Hitler's generals swore by it. But deception alone wasn't enough. It needed theater, illusion, the kind of trick that could fool an army's eyes. In the English countryside, under tight secrecy, engineers and artists created entire armies of rubber and plywood. Inflatable tanks, fake landing craft, wooden planes, an army that could be seen from the sky but touched by no hand. They called it the Ghost Army. To the Luftwaffe's reconnaissance pilots, it was real. To Allied commanders, it was a masterpiece of disguise. Every decoy, every shadow, played its part in the grand illusion of Normandy's distraction. In leading this phantom force, General George S. Patton, to the Germans, it was the Allies' most aggressive, most unpredictable commander, the man who would surely lead the invasion. So they watched him closely, just as the Allies wanted. Patton commanded the fictitious 1st U.S. Army Group, stationed in southeast England opposite Calais. Dummy tanks lined the fields. Fake radio chatter filled the air, and Patton's mere presence sealed the deception. Berlin's spies reported what they saw, and what they saw was exactly what Bodyguard wanted them to believe. Yet while the Ghost Army fooled the eye, Operation Fortitude South fooled the mind. Garbo's network of phantom agents reported troop buildups near Dover. Ships spotted crossing the channel toward Calais. Reports flowed to the Abwehr, confirming Hitler's belief that the invasion would strike their not Normandy. Every false signal, every coded phrase reinforced the illusion. Even intercepted Allied mistakes were part of the act. The enemy was listening and the Allies were counting on it. In war, truth became a weapon. Lies became the armor that protected it. Meanwhile, another deception took shape in the Mediterranean Operation Zeppelin. Its purpose: convince Hitler that the Allies would invade Greece and the Balkans. British intelligence sent false radio traffic, created fake military orders, and planted rumors across neutral territories. German forces were stretched thin, uncertain where the next strike would land. It was a chess game on a global board, with the Allies moving pieces that didn't exist. Every move misdirected the enemy's gaze. Away from Normandy, away from the truth that hid in plain sight beneath the waves of the Channel, in the shadows, codebreakers at Bletchley Park watched the enemy's confusion unfold. Through ultra-intercepts, they read decrypted German messages, confirming the success of Bodyguard. The Germans spoke of massive forces near Calais forces that weren't real. Analysts smiled quietly, knowing their illusion was working. But with that triumph came pressure. If even one part of the deception failed, if one double agent cracked, the invasion could collapse before it began. Every heartbeat at Bletchley, every decoded word carried the weight of millions waiting to land on Normandy's beaches. Still, the stakes rose higher. The Allies needed to protect DA's most fragile secret, its timing. Operation Glimmer and Operation Taxable would handle that. On the night before the invasion, small fleets of aircraft flew deceptive radar patterns off the French coast, dropping window-thin strips of aluminum to create the illusion of invasion fleets heading elsewhere. German radar. The sky itself seemed to lie. Echoes bounced, blips multiplied, and chaos filled the screens. The enemy couldn't tell where the storm would strike, and by dawn, it was already too late. But deception wasn't perfect. Some Allied officers doubted its success. What if Hitler sees through it? One asked. Then we'll be fighting ghosts and shadows. Yet others knew the entire invasion depended on faith. Faith that men like Garbo and ghosts made of rubber and wire could outthink the Reich's most paranoid mind. Churchill called it the highest form of courage to deceive in defense of truth. It was a gamble unlike any before. A war fought not for territory, but for perception, and perception was power. June 5, 1944. The storm raged over the Channel. The day was delayed, yet the deception continued without pause. Garbo's agents reported troop readiness along the Calais front, convincing the Germans that the main assault was still to come. In Berlin, Hitler refused to move his panzer divisions. He was certain Normandy was a diversion, a feint to lure his armies away. Bodyguard had him exactly where they wanted. And as the real invasion fleet assembled in the darkness, the most audacious lie in military history was about to meet its truth. At dawn on June 6th, the sea erupted. Thousands of ships, tens of thousands of men, surged toward Normandy. But Hitler still believed the real invasion was yet to come. His generals begged to release the reserves. He refused. "Hold them for Calais," he ordered. "That is where they will strike." And so, while the beaches of Omaha, Utah, and Juneau ran red with sacrifice, armored divisions stood idle miles away. Operation Bodyguard had done the impossible, had paralyzed the enemy with belief. And that belief bought the Allies precious time. For 48 critical hours, the deception held. Garbo sent urgent messages to Berlin, claiming the Normandy landings were only a feint. He warned that the main assault would come at Calais within days. The Germans believed him. Reinforcements stayed frozen in place while the Allies built their foothold. Each hour saved thousands of lives. Each lie deepened the illusion. And when the truth finally dawned, when Hitler realized he had been fooled, it was already too late. The tide of war had shifted not by bullets, but by words. But every lie carries a cost. The men of deception lived in constant fear of exposure. Garbo couldn't reveal who he truly was, not even to most Allied officers. The double agents of Bodyguard operated in silence, knowing discovery meant death. Their victories were invisible and seen on maps, unspoken in medals. Yet they bore the weight of knowing their falsehoods paved the way for truth. History would remember the beaches, the soldiers, the flags, but hidden beneath it all were the storytellers of war who never fired a shot. When the smoke cleared, Hitler's armies were in retreat. The Western Front had cracked. But even then, the Fuhrer clung to the myth Bodyguard had spun. He ordered defenses kept at Calais for weeks, still expecting Patton's Phantom Army to arrive. The lie had outlived the battle. It had become its own reality. Allied commanders marveled at how long the illusion endured. What began as trickery had transformed into a masterpiece of strategy, a psychological victory, as profound as any fought with steel or fire. Operation Bodyguard was more than deception, it was vision. It was the recognition that in modern war, truth alone could not win. To defeat tyranny, one had to master illusion. From Garbo's letters to Patton's shadows, every element formed a symphony of misdirection that reshaped history. Hitler's downfall began not with a bullet, but with belief. And as the Allied forces pushed inland, one fact became clear: the world's greatest army had been blinded not by might, but by imagination. The war for truth had been won by lies. The storm had passed, but its echoes remained. As the Allies pushed inland from Normandy, German commanders struggled to understand what had gone wrong. Ports from Calais still warned of a second invasion. Tired divisions vital to the defense of France stood, waiting for an enemy that would never come. Operation Bodyguard had done more than deceive, had paralyzed. In Berlin, Hitler refused to believe Normandy was the main attack. For weeks, his army stayed frozen, chained by lies spun with surgical precision, and by the time the truth dawned, it was already too late. The walls of the Reich began to tremble. By late summer, Allied tanks rolled through liberated towns. Villagers cheered through tears, waving flags they had hidden for years. And behind every victory was an invisible army, the deceivers, the cryptographers, the agents who had built the illusion brick by brick. They watched the headlines with quiet disbelief. Their work had saved thousands, yet could never be spoken of. No medals, no fanfare. Just a silent pride, knowing the war's turning point had been forged not in steel, but in shadows. In London, the Double Cross Committee disbanded quietly. Files were sealed, names erased. The greatest deception in modern warfare became a secret buried under decades of silence. Men like Garbo Puig disappeared into obscurity. His German handlers still sent him medals, believing him a hero of the Reich. In truth, he had served both sides and fooled them all. His web of lies had been so convincing, German intelligence cited his reports long after the war ended. It was deception elevated to art. And like all great art, required sacrifice. Even in victory, there was guilt. Some agents lived with the burden of betrayal. They had deceived friends, even lovers, to keep their covers intact. Others carried the weight of bloodmen who died believing false information fed to them. War had twisted morality until right and wrong blurred into gray, but that was the cost of survival. The cost of saving millions by sacrificing truth. "We did what had to be done," one operative later whispered, and it worked. The words hung heavy, like confession and vindication in one breath. In Hitler's bunker, denial ruled until the end. Even as Allied forces closed in, he raged about Kala, convinced the real invasion would strike there. Operation Bodyguard had done its work too well. The Phantom Army still haunted his maps. Fake divisions, imaginary names, invented commanders had taken on a life of their own. He had been fighting ghosts. In that delusion, his empire crumbled. The dictator who trusted no one had trusted lies of his own making. History's cruelest irony, defeat delivered by belief itself. When the war ended, the truth stayed hidden. The archives remained locked. The deception operatives faded into anonymity. It wasn't until the 1970s that declassified documents revealed the scale of Operation Bodyguard. Historians were stunned. What they uncovered was not just strategy, but theater. Performance so vast, it rewrote the meaning of warfare. The Allies hadn't just invaded France, they had invaded Hitler's mind, and in doing so, they had proven that intellect could triumph over brute force. Operation Bodyguard, one historian wrote, was the greatest lie ever told for the sake of truth. That paradox defined it a war, fought with illusions to save lives. Every fake radio transmission, every inflatable tank, every coded telegram carried moral weight. Could deception ever be noble? The question lingered. Right. Yet the outcome was undeniable. Without it, Normandy might have failed. The war might have dragged on, and Europe might have fallen to darkness for a generation more. Sometimes it seems saving the world requires breaking its rules. In the ruins of Europe, a new kind of warfare was born. Psychological. Operations-PSY-Ops- became the silent frontier of the Cold War. Nations learned from Bodyguard's playbook. Propaganda, misinformation, and perception replaced bullets as tools of control. Truth became a weapon and a target. The ghosts of Bodyguard lived on in every deception that followed, from Korea to the Cuban Missile Crisis. The line between illusion and reality had been redrawn forever. Humanity learned to doubt even what it could see. But for those who lived it, Bodyguard was never about power. It was about survival. It's about finding light in a world swallowed by darkness. Many of its architects died unknown, their work classified beyond their lifetimes. Yet their legacy endures in freedom itself, because the beaches of Normandy were won not just by soldiers and sailors, but by dreamers and deceivers who dared to imagine the impossible, who proved that courage doesn't always carry a gun. Sometimes, it carries a lie worth telling. Garbo lived out his final years under a false name. He ran a bookshop, raised a family, and told no one the truth. When historians finally found him decades later, he laughed softly. "I only did what I thought was right," he said. To deceive the devil, one must become the devil. It was both confession and poetry. The man who fooled Hitler had become a ghost, forever trapped between worlds of truth and illusion. Yet history would remember him as the man who lied to save the world. Others met quieter ends. Actors, forgers, signal officers, codebreakers all scattered back into ordinary life. Their hands had shaped the outcome of history, yet their names never made the books. But maybe that's how it should be, because deception by nature must stay unseen. What mattered wasn't the glory, it was the result. And when peace finally came, they stepped out of the shadows. Leaving behind the world they had tricked into believing, time softened the story. Films turned the deception into spectacle rubber, tanks glinting under the sun, phantom armies marching to invisible drums. But beneath the drama lay something deeply human. Fear, resolve, imagination, operation. Bodyguard wasn't just a military planet, was proof of human ingenuity under fire. Proof that even in the darkest moments, the mind can fight back when the body cannot. That's what made it timeless. That's what made it beautiful. Today, its echoes still shape our world. In an age of digital warfare and disinformation, Bodyguard feels eerily prophetic. Same tools once used to save the free world are now turned inward, used to divide it. The lesson remains. Truth is fragile, and belief can be weaponized. But if deception once saved humanity from tyranny, then perhaps truth can save it again. That balance, the eternal war between illusion and reality, still defines us. And yet, there's hope. Because Operation Bodyguard, at its heart, wasn't about deceit. It was about faith that intelligence could outwit destruction, that courage could exist without violence. It showed that even in chaos, creativity matters, that imagination can win wars. And maybe that's the message we still need today, that the power to shape the world lies not in fear, but in understanding. Not in force, but in foresight. So remember this. When history feels distant, when truth feels uncertain, remember the men and women who fought a war without weapons, and one they built illusions that became salvation. They fooled a tyrant and freed a continent. Operation Bodyguard was more than deception, it was destiny, written in smoke and silence. And if their story moved you, let it live again. Like, comment, share their courage, keep their truth alive, because even now, the greatest weapon humanity has ever known is imagination itself.